It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso on S3. Now we're focusing on the environment, and Wildtrust is a South African non-profit NGO that consists of two core programs, one focusing on wild oceans with the aim of protecting and preserving marine species and advocating for health oceans. Currently, they are running a campaign that aims to shift the negative perceptions that exist around sharks, exacerbated by media through the films of Jaws and The Meg. This spectacular animal has continued to make headlines, from shark spotting to the removal of shark gear at KZN beaches just yesterday. Now, joining us to educate us on these beautiful aquatic creatures this morning is Wildtrust Research Assistant Lee De Necker and Wildtrust Communications Assistant Thandeka Hlongwa. Good morning, ladies. Great to have you both here.
Morning. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely. So let's kind of begin with what Zoe touched on, Lee, about the fact that the media has not necessarily helped in painting the picture of what sharks are all about, because we've seen movies that just send shock and horror into the minds of people. What are some of the myths and misconceptions that people have about these creatures?
So yes, exactly like you said, unfortunately, when we hear and see about sharks, it's often in news articles based around bite incidents or TV series that have created this horrible, dramatic situation around them. But rather than being encouraged to learn more about them.
Yes.
So the reality is we have approximately 500 different species of shark globally, and only a handful of those are really considered dangerous. And even so, not anywhere close to the way they are portrayed in these movies.
Yes, yes.
And Jaws. Also, sharks have been around for hundreds of millions of years. So that means that they have been there before the dinosaurs, and they've evolved to continue to survive long after the dinosaurs have been extinct. So they have survived everything that this planet has thrown at them. But I think our real question is, are they going to survive us? And the misconception, and perhaps the biggest irony, is that we are, in fact, their biggest threat and not the other way around.
And you would assume it is the other way around, because maybe, Thandeka, you can shed some light on it. When we go to the beach, we're entering their territory. And someone once said, you know, the ocean is like a jungle, and we forget about that. Here we go with a little bit of sunblock and a bikini, you hardly dress, and you would never do that in the jungle. But what is it about humans that could fascinate or interest sharks, and what should people be conscious of when they go into the ocean?
So there's a couple of things that you can always consider when you're swimming in the ocean, but I think a good rule of thumb, just as you'd have the same respect for if you're in the wild, if there's an elephant sort of stampeding towards you, you would back down and sort of give it its space. So the same sentiment should be shared with sharks. But I think the most fascinating thing for me when I think about sharks, or even the few times that I've engaged with sharks, is how gentle they are. And of course there was that just honest to God instant shock because Jaws, and the shark was like swimming towards me. But I was telling Lee this morning that for me, sharks really remind me of puppies. And like any good puppy that maybe doesn't have hands, the nearest thing to them that they can sort of touch you with or engage with is their snout. So then instantly then you also get into panic mode. You think that these sharks are like, you know, attacking you. Meanwhile, they're just feeling you out. But apart from just the physical attributes of sharks, ecologically, there would be a lot of detriment to our oceans should there be one less keystone species. So just like if there were no cockroaches, there'd be something that is fundamentally wrong in our lived environment. So I think it's very important to, when we think about sharks, to also think about the importance that they play in the health of our ocean, which subsequently is of benefit to us as we use the ocean as a great cleaner of the oxygen that we all need.
Yeah. Something that I was surprised to learn is that sharks are among the most endangered species of animals in the world, and even more so than the rhino. And, you know, we put a lot of focus on campaigns around Rhino Day, Rhino Month, and so on and so forth. But why is that so, Thandeka? Why are sharks among the most endangered?
So sharks are amongst the most endangered species, mainly because they are slow to mature, and by the time that they do get to the age of reproduction, it's not fairly easy for them to carry too many young. And so because the numbers are dwindling and they aren't able to mature as quickly as they can birth themselves out, it means that the few species of sharks that we do have in our waters are accidentally being caught through overfishing. And sometimes they're not really useful to the people that are fishing them, so then they're thrown back out, which is a term known as bycatch, which is obviously not good if the shark is not going to be of any use to the
Yeah, and
water
you're
that
essentially throwing back a dead shark into the water, right?
Yes.
It's quite scary.
Sure.
It's extremely scary. And Lee, I know locally they say the large tooth sawfish and the green sawfish are considered locally extinct. What does that mean? Tandeka briefly touched on it earlier, but what does it mean when species become extinct in the greater scheme of things?
So sharks as apex predators, if we had to remove them from the ocean spaces, it would have detrimental effects that would cascade right throughout any food chain. So because they control the structure and function of marine food webs, if we remove them, it essentially affects not only the fish populations, as well as everything down to the crabs, which are things that sharks may eat, but it's also things that we may eat, all the way down to the phytoplankton and the algae producing the very air that we breathe. So for their critical role that they play in maintaining the delicate balance that keep our oceans healthy, we need sharks not only for the survival of our oceans, but for our very own survival. And I think that's a very important thing to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why should we care about them?
That's exactly why they are just as important to our livelihoods as well. And as Zoe said early on, we certainly are learning a lot from these two ladies here who are from the Wildtrust. And we will continue our conversation with them regarding sharks and their importance to our ecology, our lived environments. And please do weigh in if you have any opinions, sending us a voice note on 063 408 8863.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show on this Tuesday morning, and we're back to chat more about the campaigns being run by Wildtrust with the aim of shifting the human perspective on sharks and how we can better live in harmony with them. And joining us to educate us on this very important topic is Wildtrust Research Assistant Lee Denacker, as well as Wildtrust Communications Assistant Tandeka Hlongwa. Ladies, a pleasure to be conversing with you around this very important work that is being done at Wildtrust. And perhaps, Lee, you could clue us in a bit more around exactly what it is that Wildtrust is doing to conserve the species.
So South Africa in particular is one of the top 3 diversity hotspots in the world for sharks and rays. So essentially that makes our country and our ocean spaces really important and possibly a lifeboat for shark and ray conservation globally. So Wildtrust is currently being funded by the Rainforest Trust as a primary funder in collaboration and with a lot of different partners, and also co-funding from the Shark Conservation Fund and Oceans 5. And this is allowing us to embark on an amazing project where we're trying to identify and expand protected areas or sanctuary areas for sharks and rays in South Africa. That is our main goal at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's very important. And I mean, Tandeka, maybe you can shed some light here. The campaign that you are doing at your sanctuary, On the Brink, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And also the youth group that you're involved with called Justice for Jaws.
Okay, so as the name suggests, On the Brink, on a communication perspective, it is very important that it sort of caught people's attention. So we're either on the brink of expansion for the protection of sharks, or we're on the brink of extinction. And I think when you say it that way, it really brings a lot into perspective. So the first and most important step is providing education and information for the public, so that the more that they garner interest on sharks, it's easier to sort of get them to lobby onto very important engagements that will also help facilitate a lot of important meetings between the government as well as communities that this work is done in. And so then one way that you can support that is by following On The Brink SA across all social media platforms, where a lot of information is shared around shark species and just general education. So Justice for Jaws then comes in that it's a youth-led group that is not just for the youth, but it's led by the youth, where they share they steer away from negative perceptions, and again, they educate around shark species. And so in doing this, they are providing education, which again is very important and essentially helps people that follow them again on their social media platforms. So On The Brink SA and Justice for Jaws are two really good platforms to follow to inform yourself in a way that is palatable and easily most understood to you.
And that's really cool to have, like, you know, trending topics around really important stuff. You know, we have young people driving the conversation out there. Earlier on, Lee, you spoke about, you know, sharks obviously being an apex predator and the effects on the entire food chain, you know, right down to the food that we eat from the ocean that would be affected. Now, if the efforts that you are imploring were to be successful and the protected areas were to be expanded, give us an example of the kinds of species that might then be protected as a result of that.
So just a note that we have amazing diversity, as I suggested, and that means we have approximately 200 different species of sharks and rays in our South African waters alone.
Just in our waters?
Just in our waters.
Wow.
So that makes it an incredible space, and South Africa is very, very special. So if we had to, for example, expand the outskirts of our current De Hoop protected area, it would be really, really important for our puff-adder shy shark, which is an endangered and endemic species to South Africa, which means it is found nowhere else in the world.
Sure.
So as special as that is for us, it makes that particular species very vulnerable to exploitation, because if it is removed from South African waters, there aren't populations in other parts of the world that can prevent it from going extinct. So that's one example of a species we can really help by expanding that particular area and others. And secondly, by expanding offshore areas along our west coast, can really do a lot to help the populations of what's now currently critically endangered, the soupfin shark, targeted by fisheries for its meat and exported. If we can protect areas offshore of the west coast for that species, it might go a long way in helping it recover.
Sure. You know what? I'm listening to this, and it's been so incredible, and we touched on it. Hollywood has painted sharks as these bad creatures, but that's not the case. And Thandeka, how can we get involved? How can we be agents of change, and how can we help Wildtrust to do what they need to do? Because you play an important role in our environment.
I think the biggest takeaway is just on talking on the campaign, but also as the trust, the main thing that we strive to do is to appeal to people's sense of, you know, like what you can do as an individual. It's great when each person can have a personal stake and understand what it means for them to conserve one thing for the greater good of everyone. So making sustainable life choices, living sustainably. There's also an app known as Sassy, which is funded by the WWF.
Yes.
Sorry.
That was always going to happen, right? That was always going to happen.
It's gonna get me one point. So yeah, when you log onto this app, you can make sustainable choices about the fish you eat. You can also shy away from single-use plastic. Little decisions that, you know, you don't even realize make a big deal in your lived environment. Your coffee mugs, you can use reusable coffee mugs. A lot of coffee shops don't usually have coffee mugs that are like sustainable. So it's in the little choices that you make which really in the end speak to the role that you end up playing as an individual for the greater good of something that we all benefit from it being healthy.
Wow, ladies, thank you so much for this educational journey we've been on for the past couple of minutes. It's certainly opened up my eyes a little bit. And of course, if you're looking to find out more on how you can be part of this movement, how you can be a change agent yourself, those two important websites for you to take note of, one being onthebrinksa.coza and the other being justiceforjaws.coza. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you
so
for having
much.
us.